So obviously NXT Takeover in your house is tonight live on the WWE Network and Peacock, and don't worry, we will be doing a live watch along and post-show reaction stream for the event tonight, so be sure to subscribe, bottom right hand corner, click the notification bell, you'll be notified when we go live for the watch along and for the post-show reaction stream tonight. But what I do want to talk about briefly here, before we get into NXT Takeover tonight, is Samoa Joe. Now, Samoa Joe has been the reports of recent rumors when it comes to a possible return to NXT, when we don't know. But this is a fascinating story that's kind of blown up in the last day or so, and it is a report that NXT officials are reportedly interested in bringing Samoa Joe back to the WWE. Now, of course, Samoa Joe was released back on April 15, along with several other talents and employees as part of the ongoing WWE budget cuts, but word is now via Fightful Select, which of course is Fightful's Patreon service. Be sure to check that out and subscribe. They do a ton of great information, great stories, exclusive stuff. First to break this story when it comes to Samoa Joe, and Fightful Select are reporting that Joe could indeed be headed back to the NXT brand, at least if talents there have heard things correctly. Now, there is an update on this, which we'll touch on in a second, but multiple NXT wrestlers and staff members say that they have heard NXT officials, not anyone specific, but NXT officials have been interested in bringing Samoa Joe back to WWE, specifically for the NXT brand. There have been pushes within WWE to bring back, of course, some of the recently released wrestlers, and Joe is one of those names. It was noted previously that there is a push to bring back someone like Aleister Black to WWE, but he is also rumored to be expected to join AEW later this summer once his 90-day non-compete clause expires. Now, regarding this push to bring Samoa Joe back to the company, apparently the support is working, as multiple sources within the company and one outside of the company have heard that NXT officials want to bring back Samoa Joe as a wrestler for the Black and Gold brand. Now, of course, he had been working as a commentator on Monday Night Raw at the time of his release, and he hasn't competed in a match since, February of 2020, when he went down with the concussions, then with the wellness violation suspension as well. Now, of course, Samoa Joe was originally signed by WWE in May of 2015. He went on to become a two-time NXT champion. He also won the 2015 NXT Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic with Finn Balor. He was called up to the main roster on January 30, 2017, and immediately received a push. He won the United States Championship twice, but ended up moving to the Raw announce table in 2019 after suffering a series of injuries. Now, as I mentioned, Joe returned to the ring soon after, but another injury put him back on the shelf, and then he violated the WWE wellness policy in late February 2020. Joe had been working commentary for several months when he was released. His last match for the company came on February 10, 2020 edition of Monday Night Raw, where he teamed with the Viking Raiders and Kevin Owens for an 8-man tag team loss to Seth Rollins, Buddy Murphy, and AOP. God, doesn't that seem like a million years ago? But when it comes to Samoa Joe, there is an update on this story as well, because Samoa Joe was reportedly at the WWE Performance Center this week. That is big. That is big. In the same vein that when the stories came about Thea Trinidad, Zelina Vega, about her possibly returning to the WWE, people will say, well, they're rumblings, they're rumors, they're discussions. Once the superstar or the talent in question appears at the Performance Center, that indicates vignettes, promos, medical testing, further discussions, who knows. But he was reportedly at the Performance Center this week, which is a big deal. It's a real big deal. Now, as I mentioned, in an update from the previous report, it has been confirmed that Samoa Joe was at the WWE Performance Center in Orlando earlier this week, according once again to Fightful Select. Now, there's no word yet on why he was there, but it was said to be a brief visit, while talent in NXT are heavily speculating on a return for Joe. Some also believe that it really is going to happen. It should be noted there is no indication as of Friday, when this report came out, that a deal has been made or will be made. According to the report, it's been reported that people within the company are pushing for some of the recently released superstars to be brought back, and Joe is one of those names. Of course, as I mentioned, Joe was released on April 15 and is reportedly under the 90-day standard non-compete clause, which would make him a free agent on Wednesday, July 14, just before Slammiversary, of course. So it's obviously a big discussion point. Is Samoa Joe going to return to WWE? There are a lot of feelings I have about this report. First of all, there is an NXT Takeover event tonight. Now, if you're going to be a real skeptic and a real naysayer for this story when it comes to Samoa Joe possibly returning to WWE, you could look at it this way. I don't know if I necessarily do, but it's a point worth mentioning. There is an NXT Takeover special tonight. NXT has not been drawing particularly well on the USA Network on Tuesday night. Certainly not as well as maybe WWE and NXT hoped it had. What's a great way to drive interest? What's a great way to get people excited or certainly make people tune in for NXT Takeover in your house tonight if they weren't considering it, is maybe a possible Samoa Joe return or debut. Now, whether or not WWE ever intends on that, just releasing that story out into the ether, just releasing that story, putting it out there, is enough for people to say, well, you know what? I wasn't going to watch NXT Takeover tonight, NXT Takeover in your house. I don't usually watch it, but I am a fan of Samoa Joe. I liked his work on the main roster. I liked his work on commentary. I'm a Joe fan from back in Ring of Honor or TNA or wherever. Maybe I'll tune in tonight. Maybe I'll watch NXT Takeover in your house. I didn't plan on it, but if Joe's going to be there or there's rumors that Joe's going to be there, maybe I'll have to tune in. That's a possibility. That's a possibility, and we can't rule that out. Now, the reason I say I don't really know if I believe that one is because if the rumors are accurate that he was at the Performance Center this week, then it is different. The only thing I would say about that is if WWE and NXT had this Samoa Joe plan, they wanted to have Samoa Joe come back, they released him, but they said, look, we want you to come back, you can wrestle in NXT, that's where you were before, it worked out really well for you there. Obviously, there's some wear and tear on the body, you had injuries, you can't do the full-time schedule, maybe you come back to NXT and you can go there. I would say that's believable, but that's a big story. That's a big surprise. Why would NXT and WWE jeopardize that big surprise by having Joe turn up the Performance Center? WWE historically have gone to great lengths to keep things secret, whether it's Edge or The Undertaker or whoever. Now, I'm not saying Edge and The Undertaker, Joe's the same level as those two. That's probably crazy to say, but my point being is that we spoke a minute ago about WWE maybe working social media or working the audience or putting false stories out there, all that kind of stuff. Well, if Joe was legitimately going to come back, if there were plans for Samoa Joe to return, if there were plans that Joe's going to show up at TakeOver in your house or Joe's going to wrestle for NXT, why would they have him come into a public space? Why would they have him come into the Performance Center and have people around, talents, officials, digital staff, whoever, people they know are going to talk to the dirt sheets, people they know are going to talk to journalists? Why would they have Samoa Joe show up there? In terms of keeping things a surprise, that's just terrible. It's awful. Almost an attempt to say that WWE wanted him to be seen. If you wanted Samoa Joe to be seen, you would have him show up at the Performance Center, right? The only thing we can say is that these reports are saying that Joe showed up at the Performance Center. There's no footage of this. There's no photographs of this, as far as I'm aware. So again, that's another thing to contend with there as well, that this is why I always say with stories, and don't get me wrong, Fight for Select, very reputable, and I do believe their stories, but you do have to, when you see these stories, you do have to question things. And there is a lot of questions, I think, about this report. Again, one, is it a false story to get people to watch NXT TakeOver? Two, if they wanted and there were legitimately plans for Joe to come back to NXT, why would he show up at the Performance Center? Because if he was going to show up at the Performance Center, people would see him. It would leak out. We know WWE has more leaks than the Titanic at this point. So again, it doesn't make sense for Joe to show up in a public setting because it kills off the surprise. And again, unless they want that to get out because they want people to watch TakeOver this Sunday, there's different elements of that. And then I guess most importantly is this is a guy that was released by WWE ultimately because he wanted to wrestle, he wanted to work, and WWE said no, they wouldn't clear him. Samoa Joe would have been wrestling a long, long time ago if he could get cleared by the WWE medical team. Those reports that came out after his release basically said that he was pushing heavily. He said he wanted to return to the ring. He wanted to wrestle. He knows time's ticking. He wanted to return. He obviously had a couple of concussions, and that's what was keeping him out for a while. But he had said to WWE, look, while I enjoyed doing commentary, and he was very, very good at it, arguably he's the best color commentator that WWE had, he said, look, I want to wrestle. Wrestling's my passion. Wrestling's my love. I want to wrestle. And they said no, they wouldn't clear him. Now, I don't think Joe requested his release, but maybe the idea from WWE's point of view was we can't have someone that expensive just doing commentary. And again, my question would be, between now and then, what has changed? What has changed between now and then? You wouldn't clear Samoa Joe a couple of months ago. Now you will to go to NXT. But if you're going to clear him, surely he's more beneficial to Raw or SmackDown in terms of being an active talent than he is for NXT. So again, there's so many different things that I look at, and I question that. I just don't. There seems to be points missing there. There definitely seems to be points missing that I don't understand. I really don't understand. I don't understand why he would show up at the Performance Center. I don't understand why, if you would clear him, you would move him back to NXT, because he's far more beneficial to Raw or SmackDown as a talent, certainly at this point of his career. Certainly Raw needs the talent, right? Raw needs main event talent. They're desperate for it. Drew McIntyre's facing Bobby Lashley for the 500th time, and crowds aren't even back, but they're already turning on Drew McIntyre because he's facing Bobby Lashley over and over and over and over again. Samoa Joe versus Bobby Lashley, WWE Championship. Yes, please, I'd enjoy that one quite a lot. So, again, I just think that if you were to clear Samoa Joe, and the point of contention really leading to his release was, I want to wrestle, I want to work, why would they say, okay, you're cleared, but you're going to NXT? Again, I find that odd, unless maybe it's a situation, like I said, physically, he knows his body can't keep up with the main roster schedule, and he can't do all of those live events. I don't know. I really don't know. This whole story to me is slightly odd. It's slightly odd, and we've heard these discussions recently, and again, I believe them to be pretty accurate, frankly, that WWE releasing some of these talents is seen less as a termination or a firing and more as a renegotiation tactic. For some of these talents, maybe a Braun Strowman, who knows, even an Aleister Black or a Samoa Joe, it was seen as a situation as the contracts that these guys have signed is too much. These contracts are no longer financially viable. We don't think they're worth these contracts anymore. The issue is they can't go to these talents. They can't go to a Braun Strowman, a Samoa Joe, an Aleister Black, or whoever. They can't go to these talents and say, we can't afford to pay you anymore, because WWE can, of course, afford to pay them. WWE are bragging on all of their investor calls and their stakeholder calls and their shareholder calls and all this kind of stuff. You've got Nick Khan coming out and bragging to Wall Street journals and all these kind of newspapers and all this kind of stuff. You have these WWE constantly saying, we're more profitable than ever. We've got more revenue than ever. Despite the pandemic, we did great. You know, despite the pandemic, we did so great. We got all of this money and all of this revenue, and it was a difficult time, but we still did great, all that kind of stuff. Despite all of that, they say all of that. They can't then go to Samoa Joe and say, well, even though we're really profitable, even though we've got all this revenue, we can't afford to pay you. In reality, it's not that they can't afford to pay them, it's that they don't want to pay them. There's a difference there. And the idea has basically been that they're willing to release these talents so that in a couple of months' time they say, do you want to come back? You can come back. Oh, by the way, the deal that you had before, we're not going to give you that deal, and we're going to give you a reduced deal. Same with Braun Strowman, right? Braun Strowman, they can say to him, look, we know you were on over $1 million per year. We don't really want to give you that contract anymore, so we'll renegotiate, but you can come back. Maybe that's the case with Samoa Joe. Maybe they've decided, look, we didn't want to give you the contract that we had before, but you can come back on a lesser rate and you can work in NXT. Now, the question then would be, why would Samoa Joe go for that? Why would he go for that? He's going to have options available to him. Of course, Samoa Joe's going to have options available to him. Samoa Joe will absolutely have an option to go to AEW. Samoa Joe will have an option to go to Impact Wrestling. Samoa Joe will have an option to go to New Japan. Samoa Joe will have an option to go back to Ring of Honor. Now, you could say, well, is he going to make as much money as he would in the WWE? If they're cutting his contract from what it was previously, there's a chance. AEW, there is a chance to make WWE money in AEW. And I think a lot of people, myself included, look at Samoa Joe and say, AEW is a perfect place for you. There's all of this talent you haven't faced before. And I understand the nostalgia of going back to NXT, but for me, there's just a lot in this story that I look at, and I just don't think it makes sense. I just don't think part of it makes sense. Would Joe be great back in NXT? Of course he would. Would NXT want Samoa Joe back in NXT? Of course they would. As I mentioned, Triple H has been all prickly on these recent media calls, talking about he doesn't like it that people are criticizing the product and people saying that they don't want to watch the product. They prefer to watch AEW, and he's saying if you don't like it, don't watch. Well, the problem is, Triple H, people aren't watching it because they don't like it. That is the problem. So you can say, well, if you don't like it, don't watch it. People are following that advice pretty close. Now, does Samoa Joe coming back to NXT move the needle? No, I don't know. But look, it's a star. It's a big name. I think Samoa Joe coming back to NXT on Tuesday nights unopposed would certainly help them out. There's no doubt about that. Certainly it would help them out. Certainly you would have people that would be interested in watching NXT that weren't watching previously. As I mentioned, I'll believe it when I see it. And the reason I say I'll believe it when I see it is just because there's parts of this story that just don't make a lot of sense for me. They really don't. Whether it's Joe showing up at the Performance Center, if he was cleared, why would he go to the NXT brand? If he was cleared, surely it would be in their best interest to go to Raw or SmackDown. If he's coming back on a reduced contract, why would he go for that when he has options available to him like AEW, like Impact, like Ring of Honor that would be willing to meet his demands? There's just so much there that I don't get. And again, the manner that Joe was released by WWE, surely there would be an element of not bitterness, but certainly like, I'm not going to go back. You know, this was a guy, he called both nights of WrestleMania. He stood in the rain getting soaked with Michael Cole. He called both nights of WrestleMania. Then he got bumped off the Raw commentary team. Then he got fired. I mean, realistically, surely this would be a guy that would be like, I'm not going to go back. Why would I go back to that? Why on earth would I want to go back to that? So time will only tell. Maybe he'll show up at NXT Takeover in your house tonight. I don't. Again, part of me, again, this is me being really cynical, I know, but part of me even thinks that they only did this because they want us to watch NXT Takeover in your house. Now, you know what I mean? There's so many points of contention to this story. There's so many bits that I just don't understand. But look, reputable outlets are reporting it, and again, the verbiage used, I think, is quite interesting. That while no officials have come out and said anything, this is coming from a talent point of view. That talent believe that Samoa Joe is going to be returning, and talents think that officials want to have Samoa Joe returning, and he was spotted at the Performance Center, but in the same way, I guess, Thea Trinidad, Zelina Vega, was also spotted at the Performance Center, and we've heard nothing about her return since. Maybe that's because Aleister Black was fired, but in the same vein, you know, of speech there, is it the same with Samoa Joe? That's a good point as well. You know, they were seen at the Performance Center. Okay, doing what? They said the chat was brief, or the visit was brief. Maybe Joe walked in. They went, right, what have you got for me? Want you to come back at a reduced rate. Well, I'm going to go back. See you later. Genuinely, it could be as simple as that. Because I have no doubt in my mind when it comes to Joe, like I said, that we've heard these stories when it comes to Impact Wrestling, reaching out to people that were released by WWE within 15 minutes of their release. Right? They were, it was the Good Brothers last year. The Good Brothers, they were contacted by Impact Wrestling 15 minutes after they were released by the company. You don't think Samoa Joe's not got a phone call at this point? Samoa Joe absolutely got a phone call at this point. And also as well, I suppose when it comes to Joe, this was a guy that when he was released, he was interacting with CM Punk on Twitter, not, you know, directly saying, you know, screw WWE, but it was kind of like they messed up. And I don't want to be one of those people that, you went back to WWE, your corporate shield, all that kind of stuff, because that's not fair. But I don't know. Again, there's so much in this story that is just, I'll believe it when I see it, but maybe I'll believe it tonight. Maybe Joe will turn up at TakeOver. Who knows? But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Samoa Joe possibly returning to NXT? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved with the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.